Okay, and we're recording. Okay. So, hi, Timea. Thank you for joining us. We'll start off the interview with you just giving us a quick introduction about yourself.
Right. So I guess there's not much to tell. I'm in my fourth year of my PhD. I'm in what's called the IGI program, which is Intelligent Games Game Intelligence. It used to be part of Goldsmiths, but I think now they're separated. So I think new people cannot join anymore. But who's been in IGI, we are still kind of supported through the end. So everyone in IGI has some form of focus on games research, but it's quite wide. There are some people researching AI for games, and then actually a lot more people recently are doing psychology related research and more player experience research. And that is what I do mostly. It's mostly related to player experience as well. So yeah, that's pretty much everything.
Perfect, thank you. And you touched a little bit on what your research is based on. Can you go into a bit more detail about what your research is about?
Yes, so my research mainly centers around how board game players interact with technologies implemented into board games, which is more common than most people think. So there are a lot more board games that have some form of technology implemented into them. And these are mostly done to some form of touch screen. So it's usually an app that's included or compatible with the board game. So my research is mostly about what people think of these and how people interact with these. And by understanding players, also just exploring new avenues of interaction design, like how we could create new forms of interactions with other than the touch screens and the apps that players would enjoy and that would be intuitive for them.
Oh, very interesting.
Thank
And
you.
how you're in you said your fourth year. How long will the research take, do you know?
Right. So actually, the IGI program is 4 years because the first year was mainly training. So the thick of the research really started in the second year. So I guess I would be sort of the equivalent of a third year PhD student in maybe non-integrated programs. And so far, I have one last study to run. So I've had two studies. One of them was through lockdown, and it had to be done remotely, and that was actually quite interesting. It took a lot longer than, of course, we anticipated. We started planning it before the whole pandemic situation, but it was really exciting as well because we had to adapt a lot of it so that it can run remotely. And I think the reason why it was interesting, because this was the first study where we tried to do more hands-on. So my first study was about board game player immersion, because that wasn't explored so much. So we were curious if it's similar to video games and what are the differences. And that was mainly about qualitative interviews. We've done a lot of research by scraping online forums and then doing a lot of grounded theory on them. So that wasn't too hands-on. But for the second study, we really wanted to do something where we have we've had these psychophysiological measures, which is basically biosignals mostly. So first, I think we were lucky because the pandemic started before we had the equipment ordered and everything. So we had to find equipment that could take body signals remotely, and I can see it. So it's not like the participants have to learn some Arduino setup or something like that, but it's ready to ship and it pairs with their existing devices, and I can see the data, and they cannot lose the data for me because I have it in the cloud. So that was the first interesting thing. And then we had to find a service that shipped this quite expensive research equipment with the necessary board game materials to participants and then from participants. So we used DPD, next day delivery. That was actually quite exciting as well. So on Monday we sent the equipment, and on Tuesday we did the study, and then on Wednesday they picked it up. So that delayed things a little bit, but I think we're still fairly on track considering. And essentially my first two studies really just built up So the first one was quite theory-based and like really understanding how players experience board games and what they consider immersive. And then the second one was mostly about how technologies are currently implemented. So we used a board game that had an app and had some soundtrack implementation in there, and what they think about it and whether or not maybe these technologies make board games more immersive for them or not, things like that. And then our third study is really just, first of all, using the information that we've learned. And then we really want to do some participatory design where we have players involved, and then we can figure out what types of interactions they would enjoy. So yes, that pretty much, I think, did I answer your question?
Yeah, and it sounds like it was a very unique study then, because not many people would have been able to have that kind of experience of the pandemic, then being able to adapt their study to still get like remote responses, and yeah, it sounds really, really interesting. So recently you had your paper submitted in the CHI conference, which is amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a bit more about what that conference is?
Right, so this was the study that was submitted to CHI, and it's essentially an annual international conference on human-computer interaction. I think I don't know, I'm not very confident in my ability, so I think I've got lucky because I've got accepted in the first round. So I think it was fairly low percentage. I don't know the numbers, but I think it was around, I don't know, maximum 17% of papers sort of accepted in that first round. So we didn't need to resubmit. That was nice. And it's a well-recognized conference. It's been around for a long time. And I think their official mission statement is that to make the world a better place with interactive digital technologies. So it's fairly related to our work as well, because it mostly centered around how people use technologies and what their problems are with them or what they like about them, how it can be sort of moved forward, the whole technology era moved forward in a human-centered way. So I think it's very important to consider the users as well. So it's actually in New Orleans this year, but I am going to go remotely. For a few reasons. I'm a bit afraid of flying, and I also didn't renew my passport. But I think for people who love travel, I think it's going to be quite exciting. But they are doing a hybrid conference, so I can luckily join and present online.
Yeah. Okay. The conference sounds great, and I'm pretty sure you're underselling yourself at the moment. I'm sure your paper was excellent as it was accepted. So how did you feel, or how do you still feel, knowing that your paper has been accepted?
Well, I felt really surprised at first. I mean, my supervisors were quite happy with the paper, so I thought, okay, it must be at least up to standards in a way. But even when you have a really, really good paper, it's really difficult to get accepted most times. So I know even very experienced researchers tell me that you can, it's up to a lot of factors whether or not you get a paper accepted. So I sort of it was a lot of work. We've got really lucky to collaborate with some really, really good researchers from other universities as well. So it was quite a collaborative project, and I felt great about the work itself. Like I enjoyed the work, and I thought my supervisors are amazing. The collaborators were amazing. So I felt good about the paper, but I still kind of felt, okay, well, it's done, it's submitted. I don't think it will get accepted. And I sort of mentally prepared to rework it a bit and then submit it to Kai Play, which is a very similar conference to Kai, but it's more focused on games. So we always have a backup plan anyway. So if your paper doesn't get accepted, it's good to have a few ideas of what to do with it and not just let it sort of, I don't know, disappear, I guess. Mm-hmm. So when it got accepted, I was, first of all, really surprised. I don't think I even understood what it meant until my supervisors kind of told me that it's a big thing. So I felt really happy. I think I'm still really happy. Sometimes I do wonder how I I got 2 papers accepted, like both papers that we had. So one was accepted to Kai Play before, and then now Kai, both of them got accepted sort of pretty quickly. So I was really happy. I'm still quite happy, but the work it's a lot of work to have a paper together as well. So I was also, I can admit this probably, but I was quite happy I don't have to rework it and then submit again. Mostly because once you finish a big research project, you sort of want to move on to the next one. So you don't want to dwell on the one that you've already done.
Oh, wow. Well, congratulations on having papers accepted. Yeah, that sounds amazing. And you mentioned a little bit that your researchers were, your supervisors were really there to help you and support you during your research. And I wanted to touch on Goldsmiths as a whole. How did you feel? How have you found the PhD course, and how did you feel maybe your supervisors and other people supported you?
So I've had a fairly smooth experience so far. I didn't have any major issues, or even if I had some smaller things, I always sort of knew who to turn to. And I think that was mostly because I trusted my supervisor. So every time I had a question or a concern, I could just ask them and they always knew what to do. Or if not, then they told me who to contact, or maybe they looked into it for me. So I've got, I guess I would say lucky, but actually I had some thought into who to have for supervisors, and I made sure I had meetings with them before we started working together. So I was actually fairly certain that we would work well together. So so yes, I think, of course, in PhDs, maybe 99% of your time you spend with your supervisors, and so that's, I think, even more important than institutions, because if things run well, I guess you don't really have to interact as much with others other than your supervisors. But even with that, I've had some really good experiences with modules, and I don't know about other PhD programs because I've only been in IGI, but in IGI it was that we've had modules, and some of them were mandatory, and then in the second year we could choose any module from any department, and I found that really good and really useful. So I could take modules that were either relevant to my research or not so relevant, but something that I was really interested in. I thought, I would still get something out of it. So in the second year, I did a module on narrative design for games, which at first didn't seem too relevant, but it was amazing. So the tutors were amazing. It was run by Federico and Federico Fascia. I think they're Italians. I don't actually know how to pronounce their names, so sorry in advance. And Maddalena Grattarola, I think that's how you pronounce her name. They were amazing, and Maddalena is amazing. She did this whole literature course and then brought games into it, and the whole synergy just inspired me so much that I think it actually changed some of the focus in my own research, even though I thought it's just gonna be a course for my own sort of enjoyment, but it was still useful in the end. So that was really memorable. And then the year before, I did a course on pervasive games and immersive theater with Sarah Wiseman. Unfortunately, she's not at Goldsmiths anymore, but she was one of my supervisors for a long while, and we worked really well together. So I just wanted to take a course by her. And again, that was something that I didn't think would influence my research as much as it did, but it made me comfortable with some of the technological elements and the sensors that I now know a lot more about and I can use in my own research. So both of these sort of influenced and shaped how I think about integrated technologies in board games in unexpected ways. So yeah, I've had good experiences so far, no issues. When I went to Kai Play, Goldsmiths did pay my fees for that, so I've got funded for that. And when we needed equipment, we've got funding for that as well. So as I say, no problems. Support was great so far.
Oh, that's so glad to hear. I'm so glad to hear that. And very happy that the Goldsmith staff inspired you to pivot and to look at your research in other ways as well. So what would you say has been the most memorable or your favorite part of the PhD process so far?
So this was mostly due to Iggy, but the first year, as I said, was some training. They do it quite interestingly, and I feel sorry for the new first years because of lockdowns. But when we did it, it was way before the pandemic, and essentially they have something they call a boot camp, because Iggy is a collaboration of a few different institutions. I think it's now only Queen Mary in York, but when I started, it was Goldsmiths, Queen Mary, York, and Essex. And basically what they do is they have about 13 to, I don't know, 15 or 16 students, and we are all across different universities. So in my year, I think there were 3 of us at Goldsmiths, and then everyone else was in other places. So what they do is they have this boot camp, which is 6 weeks, and we spent 2 weeks at a different institution. So the first 2 weeks we would, I think it was actually York for the first 2 weeks, and then they ship us to London, and then the second 2 weeks was at Goldsmiths, and then the third one was at Queen Mary. And it's essentially just a very intensive way of delivering modules. So in the 2 weeks, like you have 1 week of sort of teaching, and then you have another week to submit your assignments. And that was just really cool, because you always work in a group, and then you work with these people who you don't see anymore, or before that, because they are from other institutions. And I think Iggy had a good way of doing this after the modules as well, because they regularly had some events like conferences for us, or game jams that we had to take together. So it's like they always bring us together, and then we can sort of work together. So that part is really good, because you work a lot alone, especially working from home for a long time, doing all your meetings online, and then suddenly, even through lockdown, they did these online conferences for us, so we could at least be together in these shared spaces. So yeah, that was really fun for me so far.
It sounds it. And I think with PhDs especially, they're very like individualistic in terms of you kind of only focus on your own research. So then having like the opportunity to meet fellow PhD students from other institutions is very, very valuable experience. Yeah.
So I just remembered that also on that note, I've got quite lucky, because so my main supervisor is Rebecca Fibrink. I think she's still partly at Goldsmiths. I think she went to UAL but kept some of her work at Goldsmiths still. But she's been great, and one of the things she did when lockdown started was to introduce a weekly meeting for all of her PhD students and postdocs and everyone who worked with her. And we still have that meeting. So it's been, I don't know, it's been 2 years almost, close to 2 years. And every week we have this half-hour meeting when we basically just go in 3 rounds, and we talk about something that's on our minds. Then we talk about something we did during the week, and then some plans that we have for the next week. And that's been really good as well, to just sort of feel real, and then have this community, even though you mostly work alone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that sounds great. Really, really good. So what would be your future plans if you when you finish your research?
That is a good question. So I've been actually looking into maybe transitioning to industry research, or more like applied research. So I've been looking into user experience, UX research, and games user research mainly. So it's quite similar to academia, but it's a lot faster, and it's more applied. So you usually have maybe games companies coming to you wanting to find something about the features that they have in their games, and then you can run a lot of studies with real players. And it's only a few weeks per study, so usually the things that you find make it into the game really quickly, and you can sort of see your impact immediately. So that's one of my plans. We shall see how that goes, but I never ruled out academia either. So I don't know, I will probably want to stay in some form of research role once I finished.
Yes, that sounds amazing. And what would you say to anyone who's actually thinking about doing a PhD, possibly at Goldsmiths? Or I know you said that the specific program you're on now isn't open to newer students, but similar programs exist. So what would you say to anyone thinking about doing a PhD?
I think one thing is that it is going to be different than what they expect. So I think it's a lot of years to think about one specific topic. And for that reason, I think it's really extremely important to find the right supervisor. So I think that's the most important decision of the PhD. I mean, I'm pretty sure there are differences between institutions. I don't know that because I've only been at Goldsmiths so far. I've been traveling to York and Queen Mary a little bit. They seemed similar, but they had some different rules. So each institution will have its different set of rules. But it's, I think, less important than your supervisors in this instance. I think when you do an undergraduate or master's degree, it matters more which university you go to, because of course your degree will have recognition in that area. So for example, Goldsmiths is famous for art, and I think it's very well regarded in games as well. So in that sense, it's important. Once you do a PhD, it's less important. It's more important to find the right supervisor, research the supervisors, and meet them at least once or twice before you commit, because the way you communicate with them, the way they think, and the way you work with them is going to make or break your experience so far. So for me, I found that a lot of people actually change their topics halfway, or find something really interesting and then go to that direction. So I think some people make the mistake of wanting an expert in a certain field, and they think that's the most important, that the person is an expert in the topic that they want to study. But every PhD is very unique. It's never going to be the same as they did anyway. So all of the supervisors will be academics. You can look at their publications, and if they publish, they will know how it works. So it's more important to find someone who can support and mentor you as a person, and who can communicate with you and understand how your brain works, than to find the biggest expert or the biggest name, because also the bigger the name, often the less time they have as well. So give a chance to first-time supervisors. Like Sarah, I was her first PhD student, I think. She was amazing. She was there for me a lot more than what I've heard from other people from other institutions, where they barely saw their supervisors because they were so busy to see them. So when you have a breakdown, or when you have this last minute edits to your paper, like before midnight, when you really have to submit on a deadline, who is going to be there for you is the most important thing. So I think I was really lucky that I could still stay at Goldsmiths when my supervisor transitioned to other universities, because they could keep their PhD students, because I didn't want to go with them. But if I couldn't keep them, I would rather transition with them, because I think that is more important for you to have the same person sort of see through your work.
Yes, yeah, that's excellent advice. Yeah, definitely agree with you on that. So thank you for taking the time out to answer some interview questions and giving us some insight on your research, and also massive congratulations again for having two papers accepted. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close the interview?
No, I don't think so. I think maybe just one thing is don't be afraid to submit papers, even if you don't think they are up to standards, because even if they don't get in, if you have a good team of supervisors, they will help you understand the feedback. They will help you tell what feedback is useful and what maybe from a reviewer who doesn't really understand your area. So it's just really good to, even when you start your research, think about where you want to publish it, and then have maybe one or two sort of backup plans for that paper, and just submit, and you might get in. You never know.
Yes, again, another piece of excellent advice. Well, thank you again, Timea, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. See you.
Bye.
Okay, let me end.